The parachute collapses across the wet grass. A figure struggles beneath it, injured, disoriented, alone. Scottish farmer David McLean approaches with caution, pitchfork in hand. In the distance, flames consume a Messerschmitt fighter bomber, the wreckage scattered across his field like broken promises. The man on the ground wears a Luftwaffe uniform. He gives a false name, Captain Alfred Horn. But his request is extraordinary. He demands to see the Duke of Hamilton immediately. He claims to carry a message that could end the war. Within hours, British intelligence will confirm the impossible. This is not some ordinary German pilot. This is Rudolf Hess, Deputy Führer of the Third Reich, the third most powerful man in Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler's closest confidant for over 2 decades, and he has just flown solo across 900 miles of hostile territory on what he calls a mission of humanity. But was it heroism or madness, a rogue peace initiative, or an elaborate trap? And did the Führer himself approve the flight that would become World War II's most enduring mystery? To understand the flight, you must first understand the man. Rudolf Hess was never supposed to change history. Born in 1894 in Alexandria, Egypt, the son of a German merchant, he seemed destined for an unremarkable life in business. But World War I transformed him. Wounded multiple times, decorated with the Iron Cross, he emerged from the trenches with something broken inside, a desperate need for meaning, for order, for a cause worth dying for. He found it in 1920 at the University of Munich. His professor was Karl Haushofer, a retired general obsessed with geopolitics and the concept of Lebensraum, living space. The idea that Germany needed to expand eastward, to claim territory for the German people by any means necessary. Haushofer's lectures planted seeds that would blossom into catastrophe. But it was at one political rally that Hess discovered his true calling. A failed artist named Adolf Hitler was speaking. His words were fire, his vision was absolute, and Rudolf Hess, wounded veteran searching for purpose, became a true believer. He joined the Nazi Party immediately, participated in the failed beer hall putsch of 1923, was imprisoned alongside Hitler in Landsberg prison, and there, in that cell, Hess took dictation as Hitler ranted and raved, capturing the words that would become Mein Kampf, the book that would blueprint genocide. Hitler rewarded loyalty. In 1933, when the Nazis seized power, Hess became Deputy Führer, second only to Hermann Göring in the succession. He signed laws, attended conferences, stood beside Hitler at rallies where hundreds of thousands chanted in unison. But by 1941, everything was changing. The war had pushed Hess to the margins. Hitler's attention turned to military strategy, foreign policy, battlefield decisions. Hess, whose duties were administrative, ceremonial, found himself increasingly irrelevant. Martin Bormann, his former deputy, had begun replacing him in Hitler's inner circle, taking his place at Hitler's side, whispering in the Führer's ear. And Hess knew what was coming. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, the war on 2 fronts that military strategists had warned against for decades. If Germany fought Britain in the west and Russia in the east simultaneously, the Reich would be crushed between 2 great powers. Hess believed he knew Hitler's mind better than anyone. They had been friends for 20 years, prison cellmates, comrades in the revolution, and Hess was convinced he understood what Hitler truly wanted, peace with Britain, so Germany could focus all its power on destroying Bolshevism in the East. But there was a problem. Churchill would never negotiate. The British Prime Minister had made that clear. No peace with Hitler, no compromise with tyranny. Fight on the beaches, fight on the landing grounds, never surrender. Unless there was another way. Unless there were still Englishmen of reason who understood that Britain and Germany had no real quarrel, Englishmen who remembered Munich, who had once admired German efficiency, who believed communism was the true enemy of civilization. Hess convinced himself such men existed, and he believed he could find them. Enter Albrecht Haushofer, son of Hess's old professor, a sophisticated diplomat, intellectual and half-Jewish according to Nazi racial laws. Only Hess's protection kept him alive. In September 1940, Hess asked Haushofer to reach out to a British contact, someone with connections, someone who might listen to peace proposals. Haushofer suggested the Duke of Hamilton, Douglas. The two had met at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, cordial acquaintances, fellow aviators. But Hess made a fatal error in judgment. He believed Hamilton was part of a peace party in Britain, a faction opposed to Churchill's warmongering. He believed Hamilton could arrange secret negotiations. The two had met at the 1936 Berlin Olympics, cordial acquaintances, fellow aviators. But Hess made a fatal error in judgment. He believed Hamilton was part of a peace party in Britain, a faction opposed to Churchill's warmongering. He believed Hamilton could arrange secret negotiations. He was spectacularly wrong, Haushofer wrote the letter. It was carefully worded, suggested a meeting in Lisbon, vague enough to deny if intercepted. But British MI5 censors caught it immediately. They forwarded it to Hamilton in February 1941, who reported it to authorities. An investigation began into Hamilton's loyalty. The Duke was cleared completely, but the letter sat in intelligence files, unread by German hands, while Hess waited for a response that would never come. By April 1941, Hess had made up his mind. He would go himself. The Messerschmitt Bf 110E-1/N, serial number 3869, was reserved for Hess's personal use starting in December 1940. It was a fighter bomber, twin engines, range of 4,200 kilometers, with auxiliary fuel tanks capable of reaching Scotland. Hess trained in secret. His instructor was Wilhelm Sturr, chief test pilot at Messerschmitt, cross-country flights, navigation practice, learning to use the FUG-10EL radio compass system all through the winter and spring of 1941. Hitler had forbidden Hess to fly for the duration of the war, but Hess convinced him to reduce the ban to 1 year. By May 1941, that year was nearly up. On May 5, 1941, Hitler and Hess met privately in the Reich Chancellery for 4 hours. No one else was present. No records exist of what they discussed. Hess's son would later claim this was their final meeting to arrange the flight. Hitler's supporters insist the Führer knew nothing. The truth died with both men, but we know what happened next. 5:45 p.m. Central European Time, Augsburg Airfield, Bavaria. Rudolf Hess climbs into the cockpit of his Messerschmitt, blue Luftwaffe uniform, maps, compass, a briefcase containing his peace proposals, and a letter to Hitler explaining everything. The letter stated clearly, if the mission failed, Hitler could disavow all knowledge, claim Hess was insane, preserve plausible deniability. The engines roar, the wheels leave German soil, and Hitler's Deputy Führer vanishes into the darkening sky. The flight itself was extraordinary. Hess flew north, following the Rhine, then across the North Sea. No radio communication, no escort, navigating by compass and maps alone on a foggy evening over unfamiliar terrain. British air defences tracked him, but failed to intercept. 2 Spitfires were scrambled. A Defiant pursued, but Hess flew low, sometimes just 50 feet above the water, evading every attempt to shoot him down. By 10:30 p.m. he reached Scotland. The Royal Observer Corps tracked his progress. Station after station reported the lone German aircraft heading west, then turning inland. He was searching for Dungavel House, the Duke of Hamilton's estate, but in the darkness he couldn't locate the landing strip. Fuel running critically low, altitude increasing. At 11:06 p.m., Rudolf Hess bailed out. The parachute deployed. The ankle twisted badly on exit, and the Messerschmitt crashed 12 miles from its destination, erupting in flames on Bonneton Moor. David McLean found him struggling with his parachute harness, and Mrs. McLean served the Deputy Führer of Nazi Germany a cup of tea by her cottage fireside while they waited for authorities. The mission of humanity had landed. May 11th, 1941, noon. The Berghof, Hitler's mountain retreat. Karl-Heinz Pinch, Hess's adjutant, delivers the letter. Hitler reads it, and then, according to multiple witnesses, he unleashes an inarticulate, almost animal outcry that echoes through the entire building. Albert Speer, waiting outside, described Hitler's rage as genuine, primal, uncontrolled. Who will believe me when I say that Hess did not fly there in my name? Hitler immediately summons his inner circle. Göring, Goebbels, Ribbentrop, Bormann. They argue for hours about damage control. Italy and Japan, Germany's allies, might think Hitler was secretly negotiating with Britain. Stalin might accelerate his own plans. The entire alliance structure could collapse. Goebbels crafts the solution. Hess is mentally ill, hallucinating, acting on his own, a victim of mystics and astrologers who manipulated his disturbed mind. By 8 p.m. on May 11th, German radio broadcasts the explanation to the world. Party member Hess has left on a flight. He has not returned. His letter shows traces of mental derangement. Hitler orders Hess stripped of all titles and positions, declares him a traitor, issues a secret command. If Hess ever returns to Germany, he is to be shot on sight. But was the rage authentic, or the performance of a master manipulator protecting an operation that had gone catastrophically wrong? May 11th, 1941. 10 a.m. Maryhill Barracks, Glasgow. The Duke of Hamilton walks into a room where Rudolf Hess, calling himself Captain Horn, waits nervously. Hamilton has no idea who he's about to meet. MI5 has been investigating him for months over the Haushofer letter. He's under suspicion of treason, though he's entirely innocent. The two men face each other. Hess speaks. "I have an important message for the British government. I am Rudolf Hess." Hamilton's world tilts. The third most powerful Nazi in existence, sitting in a British military hospital, claiming he's on a mission of humanity. Hess explains his proposals. Germany wants peace with Britain. The British Empire can remain intact. Germany only wants a free hand in Europe. Together, Britain and Germany can stand against the real threat, Soviet communism. Hitler has always admired the British. This war is unnecessary, tragic, a misunderstanding between two great peoples. And surely Hess insists Hamilton, as a prominent member of the British Peace Party, can arrange meetings with those who think rationally, who understand that Churchill's obstinacy is destroying civilization. Hamilton listens, takes notes, promises to relay the message, then he immediately reports to his commanding officer and requests a meeting with Churchill. Hess has chosen the wrong man entirely. Hamilton is loyal to king and country. There is no peace party, no faction waiting to overthrow Churchill, no aristocrats ready to betray Britain to Nazi Germany. Hess has flown 900 miles based on a complete delusion. Churchill's reaction is immediate. Keep Hess imprisoned, interrogate him thoroughly, extract every piece of intelligence, but above all, maintain secrecy. If word spreads that Hitler's deputy came to negotiate, it could have catastrophic consequences. America might question British resolve. Stalin might think Britain was betraying the alliance. Churchill's political opponents might seize on it as evidence that peace was possible. So Hess becomes Britain's most secret prisoner. He's moved to the Tower of London, the last political prisoner ever held there. Then to Camp Zede, Mitchett Place in Surrey, a fortified mansion surrounded by 150 soldiers. Intelligence officers interrogate him daily. Psychiatrists examine him endlessly, and what they find disturbs them. Hess believes his food is poisoned. He refuses to eat unless someone tastes it first. He complains of stomach pains, headaches, mysterious symptoms. He claims that supernatural forces, secret forces, control the minds of Churchill and other British leaders, filling them with irrational hatred of Germany. He becomes convinced that Jews possess psychic powers that allow them to manipulate world events, that the Holocaust is a Jewish plot to defame Germany, that he's being deliberately kept awake by his guards to break his will. The psychiatrists conclude mentally unstable, paranoid, hypochondriac, not insane but not fully rational either, operating in what one doctor called the borderlands of insanity. On June 16, 1942, Hess attempts suicide. He throws himself down a flight of stairs at Mitchett, fracturing his femur. It takes 12 weeks in traction to recover. Doctors warn that another attempt is likely. The mission of humanity has become a study in psychological collapse. 80 years later, we still don't know the complete truth. Did Hitler know? The evidence is contradictory. Hess himself insisted the Führer was ignorant of his plans. Multiple witnesses described Hitler's genuine rage. A 1946 MI5 investigation concluded Hess acted alone. But doubts remain. That 4-hour meeting on May 5th, the letter giving Hitler plausible deniability, the timing, just weeks before Operation Barbarossa. Some historians argue Hitler approved the mission as a last-ditch attempt to neutralize Britain before attacking Russia. If it succeeded, wonderful. If it failed, disavow Hess as insane. Win-win. Others point to Karl-Heinz Pinch's later testimony, extracted under Soviet torture, claiming Hitler knew in advance. But can we trust confessions obtained in Stalin's prison cells? Was it a British intelligence operation? A 1943 American Mercury article claimed MI6 lured Hess to Britain through deception, that the flight was expected, that he received an RAF escort. But declassified files show British intelligence was caught completely by surprise. The Haushofer letter was intercepted, yes. Hamilton was investigated, yes, but there's no evidence of a deliberate trap. Some believe it wasn't Hess at all, that a double flew to Scotland while the real Hess was killed. But Yvonne Kirkpatrick, the Foreign Office expert on Germany, positively identified him. Hess wrote numerous letters containing personal details only he could know. His handwriting matched perfectly. And why would any double accept life imprisonment without revealing his true identity? The simplest explanation is probably correct. Rudolf Hess was a true believer whose faith in Hitler's vision blinded him to reality. He was sidelined, desperate to regain relevance, convinced he understood Hitler's true desires better than Hitler's own generals. He was influenced by his friend Albrecht Haushofer, fed misinformation about British peace parties, and driven by mystical thinking, astrology, supernatural dreams, occult forces. He was mentally unstable but not insane, paranoid but functional, a true believer who undertook an epic solo flight based on a foundation of delusion, and he paid for it with his freedom. Nuremberg, 1946. Rudolf Hess sits in the dock with Göring, Ribbentrop, and other Nazi leaders facing justice. He claims amnesia, can't remember the war, can't remember his crimes. Later he admits it was a ruse, though no one understands why. The tribunal convicts him of crimes against peace. The death sentence hangs in the balance, but ultimately they sentence him to life imprisonment. Spandau Prison, West Berlin. For 46 years, Rudolf Hess remains imprisoned. The other Nazi war criminals are eventually released, but the Soviet Union vetoes every attempt to free Hess-Stalin, believed the British had conspired with Hess. The Soviets will never forgive, never forget. Hess grows old in Spandau, monthly visits from his wife and son, constant surveillance. He continues to claim his food is poisoned, continues to suspect conspiracies, continues to believe he acted rightly, that history will vindicate him. By the 1980s, he's the sole prisoner in an entire prison, the world's most expensive inmate, aging, frail, requiring constant medical care. August 17, 1987. Hess is 93 years old. Guards find him hanging from an extension cord in a garden shelter. Official verdict: suicide. But questions remain. His family insists murder. How could a 93-year-old man who couldn't tie his own shoelaces fashion a noose and hang himself? Who benefited from his death on the eve of potential release? What secrets died with him? Even in death, Rudolf Hess generates conspiracy theories. May 10, 1941, changed nothing and changed everything. Hess's peace proposals went nowhere. Churchill dismissed them immediately. Britain never wavered. Operation Barbarossa launched on June 22, 1941, exactly as planned. The war on two fronts Hitler feared became reality. Germany was crushed between Allied powers in the West and Soviet forces in the East. But Hess's flight revealed something profound about the Nazi regime. It showed that even at the highest levels, Hitler's government was chaos. No institutional checks, no rational decision-making process, just personalities, grudges, mystical thinking, and the whims of a dictator who inspired such devotion that his deputy would fly solo across enemy territory on a mission of delusion. Martin Bormann, who replaced Hess, became one of the Reich's most powerful figures, orchestrating Hitler's final days in the bunker, then vanishing into myth after the war's end. Albrecht Haushofer, who had written the letter that started everything, joined the German resistance. He was arrested after the failed 1944 bomb plot against Hitler in Berlin's Moabit prison. He wrote 80 sonnets, beautiful, haunting poems about complicity, guilt, and moral failure. On April 23, 1945, as Soviet troops entered Berlin, SS troopers shot Haushofer in the neck and left him dead on Invalidenstrasse. His brother found his body weeks later. The Duke of Hamilton spent decades defending his reputation against conspiracy theories. He sued communists who claimed he was friends with Hess. He worked with historians to release classified files. He maintained his honor until his death in 1973, though suspicions lingered, and the files remain classified. The last British documents related to Hess were supposed to be released in 2017. Some have trickled out, but researchers believe crucial files are still hidden, redacted, or destroyed. Why? What secrets could possibly matter now, 8 decades later? Perhaps the answer is simpler than we imagine. Perhaps there is no grand conspiracy. Perhaps governments are simply embarrassed by their own confusion, their own failures of intelligence, their own inability to understand the madness unfolding before them. Or perhaps something darker remains hidden. On a foggy Scottish moor in May 1941, a parachute collapsed across wet grass. A man struggled beneath it, injured and alone, carrying proposals for peace that would never be accepted, representing a Führer who would soon disown him, believing in a fantasy that existed only in his own fractured mind. He was not a hero. He was not a master spy. He was not executing a brilliant plan. He was a true believer who mistook delusion for destiny. And in that single flight across 900 miles of darkness, Rudolf Hess crystallized everything tragic about zealotry, the danger of absolute loyalty, the peril of mystical thinking, the catastrophe that unfolds when ideology replaces reason. History remembers him as a curiosity, a footnote, the Nazi who flew to Scotland, but he was something more unsettling than that. He was a reminder that the most dangerous people are not always the cynical manipulators or the calculating monsters. Sometimes they're the true believers, the ones who are absolutely certain they're saving the world, even as they plunge it deeper into darkness. Rudolf Hess believed he was on a mission of humanity. He believed until his last breath that he had done the right thing. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying truth of all. The parachute lies in a museum now. The Messerschmitt wreckage is scattered. The letters are in archives. The files remain classified. But the question endures, was he insane, on a mission, or lured into a trap? The answer is yes, all three and none. Because sometimes history refuses to reduce to simple explanations. Sometimes the truth is that a man flew into darkness believing in light, and what he found was neither heroism nor treachery, but the cold, hard ground of reality, where idealism shatters and delusions collapse, and the mission of humanity ends with a cup of tea in a Scottish cottage, surrounded by strangers who will never understand